Hi, my name is Margaret Rawlings, and I've chose to name my current event project Disease After Dorian. I'm going to start out by giving a brief summary of the event. The WHO is Hurricane Dorian that made landfall as a Category 5. Hurricane Dorian was the most intense tropical cyclone on record to strike the Bahamas and is regarded as the worst natural disaster in the country's history. It was the fourth named storm, second hurricane, and the first major hurricane of the 2019 Atlantic season. What are all the citizens impacted by this hurricane and the diseases that are coming about as a result of this natural disaster? The death toll is now at 58 people and is expected to keep rising. The hurricane made landfall on September 1st, 2019, and ended its destruction on September 8th, 2019. Hurricane Dorian initially struck the Abaco Islands on September 1st and then proceeded to hit the Grand Bahama and continued its path along the coast of the southeastern United States and Atlantic Canada, leaving behind considerable damage and economic loss in those regions. The risk for disease is because of the lack of access to toilets, clean water, and medical infrastructures that provide medications and health services to people of those regions. The hurricane formed as a result of dry air from the Saharan dust storm that had moved over the middle of the Atlantic, which made warm water and air rise rapidly into the moisture rich atmosphere. This all matters because without access to hygiene, clean water resources, or medical relief, the death toll in those areas is determined to rise at great numbers. I use four sources for my current event. My wire source is Reuters, which has minimal bias and tends to fall in the center for media bias. This source is known for its factual reporting with proper use of sourcing information. One major mainstream source that I chose was Time, which has a slight to moderate liberal bias. This source often publishes factual information that uses loaded words to favor liberal causes. Another major mainstream source that I used was Forbes, which has a slight to moderately conservative bias. They often publish factual information using language to favor conservative causes. The out of mainstream source I used was Mother Jones, which has a slight to moderate liberal bias. This source, like Time, often publishes works that are favored to liberal causes as well. I chose to utilize these sources because I thought it would be effective to look at sources that came from different positions on the media bias spectrum, from liberal to center to conservative. I want to analyze these and see if there are any discrepancies between them or any different tones used on the information that they share, and if there are any consistencies between the four. Now, going on to comparing and contrasting sources, the first thing that I did was look at the titles of these articles. The Forbes article that I read was published on September 5th while the hurricane was still in action, and the title of this was In the Wake of Hurricane Dorian, the Bahamas Face Public Health Challenges. So I thought this was an objective title and let the reader know the gist of what they will be reading while not giving away too much information about what health challenges are present in order to entice the audience to continue reading. The Mother Jones article that I analyzed was published on September 8th, so just as the hurricane had ended. The title of this piece was Hurricane Dorian Survivors Feel Abandoned. So this title did not so much focus on the disease that was present in the islands as much as they did on how the citizens were coping with their loss of property and loved ones. The article's focal point was how they incorporated multiple interviews with citizens about what they were planning to do with no resources for water or food, and only briefly included the risk of people getting sick from standing bodies of water. I think that this title nicely informed the reader of the story. The Times article that I used was published on September 12th and was titled Hurricane Dorian is Gone, but the Bahamas still face a big risk from infectious disease. I believe that this title draws the reader in because it emphasized the fact that the wreckage from the storm was not the only thing that the people of the area needed to be wary of. I think that this title was objective in the sense that it did not give an opinion on the matter and did a really good job of letting the readers know what they will be viewing. The Reuters article was also published on September 12th and was titled After Dorian, Disease's Next Threat to Shattered Bahamian Island. I thought that this also did a really good job of pulling the reader in because it makes the reader wonder what disease, how bad those diseases could be, and what they have done to the citizens there. I think that this title follows the previous articles by remaining objective and not inserting any bias. So the next thing I did was analyze the leads of these stories. I thought that the Forbes lead was the most nitty gritty, strictly hard lead. It reads On September 1st, Hurricane Dorian made landfall in the Bahamas as the strongest Category 5 storm to ever hit the archipelago with sustained winds of 185 miles per hour and 220 mile per hour wind gusts. So I thought that this lead stuck to the who, what, when, where, and why of the story and did not stray to any other information at all, and that it was written in the active voice, and it was effective because it informed the reader with the basic facts of the event. However, I didn't think that it necessarily drew the reader in because it was very simple and only presented those basic facts. I thought that the Reuters lead was a soft lead, particularly a scene setter lead. It reads piles of debris, decaying human and animal corpses, and fetid water on storm hammered Great Abaco Island in the Bahamas are now posing a new risk for those who survived Hurricane Dorian's wrath disease. So, this lead is written in the active voice, and I thought it was very effective and drew the reader in by giving them a lot of visual imagery about what the islands inhabited, while also giving factual information of who, what, and where. So the lead for the Times article is a soft one, more specifically a narrative lead, I thought. It reads Hurricane Dorian's 185-mile-per-hour winds and punishingly slow pace smashed entire neighborhoods in the Bahamas, killing at least 50 people. But now Bahamians are facing a different kind of threat. The lack of access to toilets, clean water, and medications puts tens of thousands at risk for disease, public health experts warn. Bahamians in the hardest hit areas are already suffering from cuts, gashes, caused by widespread debris and wreckage, but now aid groups are saying survivors are beginning to show signs of gastrointestinal issues from contaminated water. Those with chronic illnesses are struggling without access to treatment for chronic conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. And if water that the storm dumped on the islands remains stagnant and untreated for long enough, it could become a breeding ground for mosquitoes, giving rise to diseases. So this lead is written in the active voice and is really effective by drawing the reader in, going beyond just the facts and giving a great deal of information regarding what happened and who was involved, where it happened, and what these citizens are facing because of this event. So for the Mother Jones article, I believe that the lead was a soft one, particularly a significant detail lead because of how descriptive the author is in describing how the area looks during the aftermath of Dorian. It reads, the silence along the Grand Bahama Highway, the only major road on the island, is foreboding, punctuated only by the occasional truck driving east. The once dense forest on either side of the road has turned to bare branches. Housing and government buildings have reduced their concrete foundation. Cars and small jet planes have been left crumpled wreckages by 185-mile-per-hour winds. Boats washed inland by the storm surge are planted among foliage. The sheer brutality of Hurricane Dorian was on display to the few people traveling back towards the worst hit areas on Grand Bahama, a thin strip of land that is home to 50,000 people. So I thought that this was written in the passive voice because the subject was receiving the action, and I believe that this is very effectively because it drew the reader in by pulling on their pathos and painting them a big visual picture of the aftermath of the hurricane. I also analyzed some of the multimedia that was used in these articles. Time used a video at the top of their article of the Carolina coast that showed the flooded streets. I think this was effective in letting the viewer know that the Hurricane Dorian isn't just affecting the Bahamas, but in other places as well. The source also incorporated some screenshots of tweets from an organization called Heart to Heart International, that is a Kansas-based organization experienced in disaster relief. They show updates of the citizens on the islands as well as scenes of the devastation. Reuters used a nice picture of the capsized boats in the Marsh Harbor, and Mother Jones used a picture of a woman who went back to salvage what was remaining of her once standing house. This picture was really effective in pulling on the audience's pathos. I think that the picture that Forbes used was really effective because it shows just how much people were willing to do to go try to save loved ones and what was remaining of their property. These were the only photos that these three sources used, which I found to be pretty strange. Maybe it was because of the lack of access they had to these islands in such a timely manner. To go into the analysis portion, I looked at the accuracy of these sources. All of them seemed to be very credible sources because of the information that they used matched across the board. Reuters is very well known for being a credible source. They had great quotes and a lot of statistics throughout their story. However, they didn't have any hyperlinks included, which I found to be odd. Time is also a very well known source and has high credibility. There were 10 hyperlinks to further information, which I thought was great. They pulled multiple quotes from interviews and also included a lot of numerical information regarding the death tolls in previous hurricanes. Forbes is a very credible and well-known source in America. This article had 5 different hyperlinks to descriptions of diseases as well as information on death tolls in the landfall of the hurricane. This source covered a lot of information regarding the hospitals in the area and focused their story on the need for rebuilding those infrastructures. Mother Jones is another credible source. This article had 4 hyperlinks to information regarding the Bahamas and the destruction from the hurricane at landfall. This source included multiple quotes from citizens of the island, which I thought was really great because they were able to give a firsthand feel of what was happening throughout the event. Now, looking into attribution, so who these sources are getting their information from and who are their sources, Reuters had 10 sources, such as Pan American Health Organization and quotes from the Bahamian Prime Minister. Time had 12 sources, for example, the Heart to Heart International Organization, and several quotes from those and organizations that are providing relief. Forbes had 3 sources, a couple from the United Nations officials, and then hospitals in the area as well. Mother Jones had 8 sources, for example, people from different agencies and other wire sources such as Associated Press. So, in discussing the objectivity of these stories, I think that they were all very unbiased and no one author took a certain radical stance on anything that they shared. Even my out of mainstream source, Mother Jones, did not include any opinion which was interesting to see. One thing that did catch my eye, though, was in the Time article where the author put down the rumors of cholera that others had hinted. The author proved with statistics and quotes from credible sources that no cholera had been detected, but alleviated the other sources who did initially claim this by saying that cholera could break out if the government was not cautious. Overall, I think that my favorite was the Time article because it included the most multimedia. The article proved the speculation of cholera wrong, which boosted their credibility for me, and also did a really nice job of incorporating a lot of hyperlinks for readers to do further research. I think that my least favorite was the Forbes article because it was fairly short, although the article included my favorite picture it used of the people walking through the floods. I would read these sources again, and I think that all of these stories met my expectations in regards to their biases, whether liberal or conservative, because this is such a big event that happened, and I don't think that there was any need for any author to incorporate their own opinions into what happened.